Parkinson's is a horrible disease. It affects my speech, it affects my walking ability, it's affected my ability to swallow, and it's affected my vision.
Larry Wiles was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease more than 20 years ago. It's a disorder of the central nervous system that destroys a person's ability to walk, talk, eat, and eventually to breathe. There is no cure.
It upsets me the way I got Parkinson's.
Larry worked as a farmer for most of his life. He began raising corn with his father as a boy in the 1960s. His dad was one of the first farmers in this corner of rural Pennsylvania to use a powerful new pesticide called Paraquat.
Good evening. We are living in what has been called the synthetic age, the age of the atom, the missile, the frozen TV dinner.
At the time, pesticides seemed to be part of a technological revolution transforming American society. Farmers prized Paraquat for its ability to kill weeds almost instantly.
Paraquat really worked. We didn't know then that it could harm anybody, but it really worked.
Over the years, scientists began to find evidence linking Paraquat to Parkinson's disease. How did you feel when you learned that Paraquat may have contributed to your disease? What were you thinking?
I feel now that they knew, and they were hiding it for the almighty dollar.
Larry is one of almost 5,000 people with Parkinson's now suing Syngenta, the global chemical giant that makes Paraquat. Paraquat is banned in more than 50 countries, including Brazil and China. It's also prohibited in Switzerland, where Syngenta is headquartered, but not the United States, where its use has doubled in the past decade. How's this possible? Why is it banned in so many countries and allowed in the US?
The US is one of the most friendly countries for pesticides generally.
Syngenta insists that Paraquat can be used safely and argues that scientists have not proven that it causes Parkinson's. But our investigation reveals a decades-long effort by the company to control the science, silence its critics, and influence regulators to protect its pesticide.
Nowhere in these thousands and thousands of pages did I see one sentence that said, we really need to be sure that we're protecting the public. It's profits over public health.
If you're out there and you're using Paraquat still in your farm, I would suggest you go out and pour it down the drain. They did us harm and they did us wrong.
Parkinson's disease. A slight tremor progresses to violent shaking. Walking, sleeping, and eating become difficult, then impossible. In the final stages of the disease, rigidity and dementia.
This one was 23, the second one was 29.
In the mid-1980s, Gary Mund worked at a local water company in Southern California. For 5 years, he sprayed Paraquat around town to keep fire hydrants and water meters clear of weeds. So you're driving and sometimes spraying it out the passenger window, holding a nozzle.
Yeah, the driver, you pull it next to it and say, spray here.
So just a long hose from the truck,
Yeah.
and you're just spraying it.
You're dragging the hose.
And is it coming on your clothes and hands?
Yeah, it's overspray. And then blow it up on you. If some breeze came by, blow it back on you.
Were you ever warned by the company or by anyone else about the health effects of Paraquat?
No, never.
Never. You had no idea.
No idea. I got spraying and overspray all the time. I didn't wear masks or gloves or anything.
At the time, Gary was in his 20s. He loved to swim and sail. He had a shelf of trophies from winning motorcycle races. But by his mid-30s, he developed tremors, the first sign of Parkinson's.
I don't know, you're pretty young in it. He had lots of trophies, but during the time when he was angry and stuff, he threw them all away.
You threw away the trophies?
He threw his trophies away, yeah.
This is being angry about getting Parkinson's?
Yeah.
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 Stages of grief.
Yeah.
Parkinson's is caused by a deficiency of dopamine, a chemical in the brain that regulates motor function. The root causes of Parkinson's are still not known, but scientists think that a combination of genetics and exposure to toxins, like pesticides, impair the brain's ability to make dopamine. Gary is 69 now. His symptoms have been getting worse since his diagnosis more than 30 years ago. Recently, in an attempt to treat the shaking, doctors implanted electrodes in his brain. It's called deep brain stimulation, and he wanted to show me what happens when he turns off the electrodes through an app on his phone. So if you change it, you'll see the shaking?
There.
I can see. Wow, so it's pretty immediate.
Yeah, it's instant.
They're walking through.
How does it feel when you're turning it on and off like that?
My diaphragm gets tight. Hard to breathe. My head was shaking, and my change settings, I feel tingling in my head.
So you would, if you didn't have this, you would shake like that all day?
Yeah, and I'm still on my meds too. I took meds off, it's a lot worse. And I can't walk, I can hardly move.
So what's it like for you to watch this now?
Yeah, when you see yourself doing that.
I look so young.
I feel like I don't remember that, especially when I hear your voice. It's like I don't remember that voice.
We spoke to someone with quite late-stage Parkinson's who, in the early 1980s, was spraying Paraquat with no protective gear. How plausible is it that Paraquat caused his Parkinson's disease?
You know, there's high plausibility. If it's aerosolized, if it's traveling on particles, the smaller the particle, the more likely it is going directly into the brain.
So how does Paraquat increase the risk of developing Parkinson's?
So what it does is it appears to kill those dopamine neurons.
Paraquat does that?
Paraquat can do that, yes.
Dr. Deborah Corey-Slechta began researching Paraquat at her university lab in the late 1990s. She had read studies from epidemiologists who found correlations between Paraquat and Parkinson's. She decided to study that link in her lab. She exposed rodents to Paraquat, then examined their brains for signs of Parkinson's. So this is a slice of a mouse's brain that's been exposed to Paraquat, and you can count the dopamine neurons in the brain.
Correct.
And what are you looking for?
We can count the number of these in animals exposed to Paraquat versus not exposed to Paraquat to see if there is a loss of the number of these dopamine neurons in that region.
With their dopamine neurons destroyed by Paraquat, the rodents developed symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Is it fair to say that Paraquat causes Parkinson's?
There's a very strong and compelling body of evidence based on the epidemiological studies and what we know from animal models of Parkinson's disease that yes, Paraquat's causing oxidative stress, that leads to the death of these dopamine neurons and hence Parkinson's disease.
She explained that the most direct way for Paraquat to get into the brain is by inhaling it.
Back in my day, used to get plugged up all the time.
So you're bringing the nozzle up to your mouth?
Yeah, and I would blow through it.
How many times do you think you breathed it in?
Oh my, hundreds.
And so while you were spraying, did it ever occur to you that what you were spraying might hurt you?
Herbicide. It hurt plants, not people.
Yeah.
So who do you hold responsible for what's happened to you?
Manufacturer of Paraquat.
Syngenta declined our request for an on-camera interview. In a statement, the company wrote that it categorically denies any allegation that Paraquat causes Parkinson's. It said that no scientific analysis had ever established a causal relationship. But by the time Gary was exposed to Paraquat in the 1980s, Syngenta executives had been discussing its risks for decades.
One day, a box of lots and lots and lots of documents showed up on my doorstep. They've really been incredible in terms of what they've revealed.
Investigative journalist Carrie Gillam spent months reading thousands of Syngenta's own scientific studies and its corporate executives' internal communication dating back to the 1950s.
This is from 1976.
Her reporting in the Guardian newspaper revealed that Syngenta's own research about Paraquat's risks at times contradicted their public narrative. In 1958, a scientist at a Syngenta predecessor company wrote that a chemical related to Paraquat was toxic to lab animals' central nervous systems. In a 1975 letter, a company scientist refers to internal concerns that the possible chronic effects of Paraquat could cause the company legal problems. By 1985, executives at a Syngenta predecessor were discussing a study that showed an extraordinarily high correlation of Paraquat and Parkinson's among Canadian farmers. So they're saying one thing publicly, yet internally they are seeing these links between Parkinson's and Paraquat.
Exactly. The documents lay out very clearly how they wanted to hide the information, suppress the science, and keep people from believing that Paraquat could cause Parkinson's disease.
In 2003, a scientist inside Syngenta wanted to see if she could replicate Dr. Corey Slechta's finding that Paraquat caused Parkinson's in mice. She found a statistically significant loss of dopamine in the rodent's brains.
And so she wanted to do the same studies and see if she came up with the same results. The problem for Syngenta is that she did come up with the same results.
So what did they do with her results?
They buried them. They buried them for years and years and years. And this was a problem for Syngenta because the law dictates that when they have new information that is relevant and important, that they are supposed to tell the EPA about it.
The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, regulates pesticides in the United States. In 2020, one of Syngenta's top officials appeared to confirm that the company withheld its internal studies from the public and from the EPA.
Did Syngenta ever publish the results of this study in a peer-reviewed journal?
I'm not aware that it did.
Fault Lines obtained footage of the company's chief scientist, Philip Botham, testifying under oath as part of a lawsuit against the company. This is the first time it has been made public.
Did Syngenta ever inform the United States Environmental Protection Agency about the loss of dopaminergic neurons observed in the study?
At the time of the study, there was this was not reported to the EPA, that I do know.
After we obtained the footage, we spoke to the attorney who questioned Syngenta's representative. In 2021, he won a $187 million settlement from Syngenta on behalf of Parkinson's patients who had used Paraquat. The company did not admit liability. Earlier in his career, he sued big tobacco companies.
The tobacco playbook is doubt, and they are the merchants of doubt. That's who they are. The same thing is done here with respect to chemicals.
I absolutely agree that Paraquat is safe for farmers and growers to use.
Wait a minute. They haven't proved this. The EPA, who's there to help, hasn't said this. Doubt, doubt, doubt.
Insufficient evidence to link Paraquat exposure to the development of Parkinson's disease.
They create doubt about what?
About the safety of that chemical.
It's a highly effective playbook. You see it in pharmaceutical, you see it in oil and gas, just as you saw it in tobacco, and you see it in the chemical industry.
So what are some of the different tactics that Syngenta has used over the years?
They developed what they called a Paraquat SWAT team that was to immediately react, anytime a new scientific study came out, so that they could squash that immediately.
I had one individual come, he actually said to me, you should never put the words Paraquat and Parkinson's disease in the same sentence.
In the deposition, Botham confirmed that the company viewed Dr. Corey Slechta as a threat.
Syngenta considered the work by Dr. Corey Slechta to threaten its aspiration for Paraquat product sales, didn't they?
The findings, if they indeed were replicable, could lead to a view being taken on the safety of Paraquat. That is correct.
By 2003, regulators around the world were scrutinizing Paraquat. Syngenta planned to vigorously defend its blockbuster pesticide. That year, the sales target was $420 million. So when the EPA sought Dr. Corey Slechta's advice in 2005, company executives sprang into action. This is important, a senior Syngenta scientist wrote. We do not want to have Corey Slechta on the SAP, the scientific advisory panel overseeing pesticides.
Here they say it would be a real disaster to have her on the SAP with 2 exclamation points after it.
Syngenta hired lobbyists to attack her reputation, while ensuring their comments couldn't be attributed to the company.
So they're going to enlist a third party to basically do their dirty work for them. And they, in fact, put the plan in place. The third party goes to the EPA, and she is no longer considered. She does not get the role on the scientific advisory panel.
By defeating Dr. Debbie Corey Slechta's nomination to the scientific advisory panel of the US EPA, Syngenta removed a threat to the continued sale of Paraquat, didn't it?
A potential threat, yes.
How did you feel when you learned that Syngenta had lobbied to keep you off the CPA panel?
It really, in a way, energizes you. I mean, I'm in this business for public health protection, so that's what I'm concerned about.
Public health has been the EPA's core mission since it was established in 1970 in response to widespread outrage at pollution and the indiscriminate use of pesticides. In the agency's first decade, it cancelled 12 pesticides, The Intercept reported. But backlash from chemical companies soon followed, and the pace of cancellations slowed.
In the last 3 decades that I have worked at EPA, it has been very rare for a toxic pesticide to be taken off the market.
Karen McCormack worked at the EPA's Office of Pesticide Programs for almost 40 years, before retiring in 2018. She agreed to speak to us in her first on-camera interview. Do you think the EPA is overall fulfilling its mission?
No, I do not think it's fulfilling its mission. Just about every new pesticide application that is submitted to the agency is approved, no matter how high the risk.
And so that allows for something like Paraquat to just stay on the market?
Yes, and a lot of other toxic pesticides.
Why is it so hard to ban a pesticide at the EPA?
Pesticide companies and their congressmen have tremendous influence on EPA's decisions.
In a statement, the EPA said it's committed to ensuring its decisions are free from unwarranted interference. Today, the agency manages more than 18,000 pesticide products. In the past decade, it has removed only 1 from the market. The EPA declined to give us an interview. But in November, we attended a meeting where the agency's top pesticide officials spoke to industry representatives and environmental advocates. Ed Messina, the director of the EPA's pesticide office, said the scientific evidence has not shown a strong enough link to Parkinson's to justify banning Paraquat.
The agency was unable to establish a clear cause and effect link between Paraquat use and Parkinson's disease.
He emphasized that the EPA has improved Paraquat safety by requiring companies to sell it in a special bottle and to update the label. Also in 2019, the EPA began requiring people spraying Paraquat to complete training and wear protective equipment.
There's a lot of worry from many of us that what's going to come from this ultimately is a few half measures that don't really do a darn thing for communities on the ground. And I just want to say, you know, of the 4 largest agricultural economies in the world, the US is the only one that still allows Paraquat to be used. The EU has banned it, China has banned it, Brazil has banned it, and use has doubled here in the last 10 years. And, you know, quite frankly, let's just follow the lead of the rest of the world here and get rid of Paraquat once and for all.
Messina declined to speak to Fault Lines on camera. Off camera, he told us that while European regulators require proof that a pesticide is safe, the EPA considers both its risks and its benefits. What is the standard for banning something? I mean, why has the EPA not banned it yet?
EPA makes decisions in some ways in terms of how much of our health are we willing to give away because of other economic or political considerations. The scientists make recommendations about what levels of exposure are problematic. That then goes into EPA, but there are lots of other factors that enter the conversation at that point, which I think include economics, probably politics, etc. It's different in Europe, where they've adopted what's called the precautionary principle, which states that it has to be found to be safe, not without those kinds of other considerations. So from a health point of view, we're not there yet.
So, we're gonna start with our first one.
May, me, my, mo, moo. May, me, my, mo, moo.
How does it feel when you have Parkinson's? What does it feel like it does to your voice and your speech?
I get smaller and smaller as far as my speech. And that feels awful because one time I could speak in front of a big audience and I didn't mind it. Actually, I relished it. And, you know, with the Parkinson's, it's killed all that.
I think the most sinister part of this whole process is the fact that companies are able to take advantage of people who trust them. And it isn't until they're 60 or 65 years old and these illnesses crop up and they get so sick that they then look at this and say, my God, how did this happen?
Larry can hardly sleep through the night anymore because of Parkinson's. Recently, he was up after 3 and decided to write a letter to Syngenta explaining why he joined the nationwide lawsuit against the company.
Message to the big companies. So to you CEOs and board members of the big companies, I wish to say to you, how dare you continue marketing and producing Paraquat and continuing to bring harm to innocent folks. And you big companies are wrong and need to be held accountable and need to pay a big price.
Larry's case could go to trial as soon as next year. When I asked him, did you think Paraquat could hurt you? He said, herbicides are supposed to kill plants, not people.
Yeah, and again, he's relying on the regulators, right, and the companies to be telling him the truth. And so when the companies are not truthful and the regulators are lax in doing their jobs, people are put at risk, and this is the end result.
You want to see this pulled from the market. Why? It's already affected you and you have Parkinson's.
Other people out there. Thinking about other people. I wouldn't want them to go through what I went through.
You don't have to go through what you went through.
What I'm going through.